The phone on my nightstand rang once at 3 a.m. and stopped. A single vibration, nothing more, but enough to pull me from sleep. 17 years ago, that same number belonged to my only daughter. The same number the phone company swore no longer existed. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe so you never miss stories like this, and drop your city in the comments. I want to know how far this voice travels tonight. Now, back to the house. I live in a one-story gray home on the edge of Greenville, North Carolina. The paint is peeling, the porch light flickers, and my mailbox leans to one side. I've been here for 15 years, long enough for the neighbors to forget my name and call me the library lady. Every morning begins the same. 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for Lydia. Hers always goes cold. I place her cup on the kitchen table beside a faded pink notebook filled with her handwriting. She loved lists, birthday ideas, library books, the names of every stray cat she tried to adopt. Sometimes I trace her letters with my finger just to feel close to her. The rest of the house is quiet. No radio, no television, no visitors. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the clock that refuses to tick evenly. Her room hasn't changed since 2008. Curtains half drawn. Stuffed bear on the pillow. A calendar still stuck on March. People tell me it isn't healthy to keep it that way, but I can't bring myself to pack anything. Every item is a reminder of who she was, and who I was before that hospital visit. I used to be a librarian at the county branch. Nights spent shelving books, mornings greeting students who came in before school. Lydia loved the smell of paper and ink. She'd sit at the corner desk and read while I closed up. We'd walk home under the streetlights, and she'd talk about stories she wanted to write one day. Then came the flu, the hospital, and everything that followed. I still remember the funeral, the sound of dirt hitting the coffin lid, and the silence that wrapped around me after everyone left. For a long time, I thought grief was loud, screaming, crying, breaking things. But the real grief is quiet. It follows you like a shadow and speaks only when you try to sleep. Some nights, I talk to her picture. Other nights, I wait for the wind to move her curtains just so I can pretend she's nearby. But lately, things have started to shift. The picture frame on the dresser keeps tilting forward, no matter how straight I set it. The porch light blinks exactly at 3 a.m. every night. And that call, the one I mentioned earlier, wasn't the first. The first came a week ago. The phone lit up with her name, Lydia calling. I stared at it until the screen went dark. When I checked the log, there was no record. I tried to tell myself it was a glitch. Maybe I dreamed it. Maybe grief found a new way to crawl back. But tonight, as the phone vibrated again, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not peace. Not fear. Something in between, a strange pull, as if someone on the other side wanted to be heard. And if you were me, what would you have done? Answer it, or let it ring? Tell me in the comments before I continue, because the next time it rang, I picked up. When people talk about tragedy, they make it sound sudden. But sometimes it begins with something as ordinary as a cough. Lydia's started on a Monday morning in March. She was 12, tall for her age, freckles across her nose, the kind of laugh that made strangers turn and smile. I thought it was just the seasonal flu. We went to St. Christopher's Hospital after school. The lobby smelled of antiseptic and coffee. A young resident named Dr. Meyer examined her and said she needed fluids and rest. He smiled politely, confident, like all young doctors are when they still believe every patient survives. They placed in 4 and said it was routine. Lydia joked about the bandage, pretending it was a superhero badge. I remember laughing with her, unaware that someone had entered the wrong number into her chart. 10 milliliters became 100. Around midnight, her skin turned pale. The monitor beeped faster. I pressed the call button once, then twice. A nurse came, glanced at the screen, and told me to relax. "She's just reacting to the meds," she said, adjusting the drip. But Lydia began to shake. Her lips turned blue. I shouted for help. No one came right away. The nurse returned, frowning now, pressing buttons, calling for a doctor. Dr. Meyer ran in, eyes wide, asking what she'd been given. I watched him flip through papers, confusion turning to panic. More nurses rushed in. Machines screamed. One of them pushed me aside as they started chest compressions. I remember counting the beats with them. 1, 2, 3, waiting for her to breathe again. She didn't. The beeping flattened into a single tone that I can still hear whenever I close my eyes. They said words like reaction, miscommunication, and tragic error. I heard none of it. I was staring at her hand, still warm but already limp in mine. A man in a suit came in later, introducing himself from the administration. He handed me a pamphlet about grief counseling and said, "We're terribly sorry." I asked him what happened. He didn't answer. He only said, "We'll conduct an internal review." Weeks later, the truth surfaced. A decimal error in her prescription. 10 times the dosage. The resident was fired, the nurse suspended, and the hospital moved on. I didn't. Reporters crowded my doorstep. Some blamed the hospital, others hinted I'd waited too long to bring her in. A lawyer offered to sue, but every meeting felt like tearing open the wound again. I kept replaying the last minute in my head, if I'd yelled sooner, if I'd pulled the plug myself, if I'd done anything differently. People like to say time heals. It doesn't. It only hides the scar under new layers of routine. After the funeral, I stayed in bed for days. Friends left food on the porch. My pastor visited, telling me Lydia was in a better place. I wanted to ask him if that better place had phones, because I needed to talk to her one more time. Eventually, I quit my job. I sold our old house because I couldn't stand the sight of her room. I thought a new town would help, but grief packed itself neatly into every box and came with me. Years passed. I aged faster than I should have. And yet, the memory of that hospital room stayed fresh, the cold light, the sound of rubber gloves, the way her hair stuck to her forehead. Every time I tried to forget, I'd dream of her calling out, "Mom?" Sometimes I'd wake up answering her. 17 years later, when that call finally came through again at 3 a.m., I wasn't sure if it was punishment or mercy. But deep down, I knew this much: someone, or something, wasn't finished with me yet. Before I share what happened when I picked up, make sure you're subscribed. Stories like this remind us how fragile trust can be, even inside places meant to save lives. If you've ever felt betrayed by someone who was supposed to protect you, say yes in the comments. The morning after the funeral, I walked through my house like a stranger trespassing in her own life. Casserole dishes lined the counter. Sympathy cards stood like little gravestones. Reporters kept calling. I let the phone ring until the sound felt like it was drilling into my skull. The hospital sent a grief counselor and a man in a dark suit. He spoke in a slow, careful tone, the way people do when they already know you're broken. He slid a folder across my table and said the board would support me. I didn't open it. I told him I wanted accountability, not a payout. He smiled, the way a man smiles when he's already finished the conversation. I hired an attorney who promised justice. He said all the right words, but his eyes never met mine. At the hearing, the nurse kept her head down. The resident doctor fidgeted with his tie and said he was devastated. The hospital lawyer objected every time I asked who typed the wrong number. The judge urged settlement. My lawyer whispered that it was the smart move. I fired him that afternoon. Neighbors came by with pies and prayers. Some stayed just long enough to be polite. Others looked around the living room like they were taking inventory of my pain. At church, people gripped my hand too long and said things like God needed another angel. I stopped going. The local news ran a short story: Greenville mother loses child in hospital error. The anchor changed tone before the next story about weather. My grief had been turned into a headline that lasted 30 seconds. I started talking to Lydia's picture, the one from her last school year. I'd tell her about the groceries, the rain, the smell of the library. Talking filled the silence but left me empty. I stopped keeping track of the days. Depression didn't crash down, it rose slow, like water creeping up a wall. Curtains stayed closed. Dishes piled up. I'd forget the laundry and rewash it days later. Friends tried to help until they couldn't anymore. Grief wears people out. They stopped calling. Lawyers from other firms reached out. Each used the same word, closure. I learned that word meant sign here. Months passed. The hospital mailed a letter typed in formal language. We regret the outcome. We wish you healing. They included a coupon for counseling sessions. I wanted the names of everyone who ignored the red numbers on that monitor. Instead, I got forms and polite signatures. I sold our old house. Every wall carried her laughter, every floor remembered her steps. I moved to the quiet edge of town and bought a small gray house. On the day I arrived, a woman across the street smiled and said, "At least you have peace now." That word, peace, landed like a slap. I tried working again. I cleaned shelves at the library for a few months until a patron whispered, "Isn't that the mother from TV?" I quit the next day. I took temp work at a dentist's office, filing records, until the smell of antiseptic made me sick. I walked out during lunch and never went back. Years blurred together. The lawsuit stalled. The nurse left the state. The resident doctor moved to another hospital. Everyone kept going like water around a rock. I was the rock, stuck, eroded, still there. One rainy night, a man knocked on my door. He said he was making a film about hospital negligence. He asked if I'd speak on camera. I said no. Then he asked if I believed in forgiveness. I told him forgiveness is free labor for people who caused harm. I spent Lydia's birthdays at the cemetery. I'd press my hand against the headstone, count to 12, and leave sunflowers. The groundskeeper always said the grass was growing fast that year. We both avoided talking about who was under it. If you've ever felt ignored by a system that caused your pain, tell me in the comments. I want to hear from you. And subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because right when I thought my story had been forgotten, something started moving in the dark. It began small, the porch light flickering at the same hour every night. The picture frame in Lydia's room would tilt forward no matter how straight I set it. The house seemed to breathe when I wasn't looking. I told myself it was the weather, or maybe age catching up with the wiring. One morning, I found a hospital envelope wedged under my front door. It was blank inside. No note. No address. Just the seal from St. Christopher's. I burned it in the sink, but the smell of disinfectant lingered all day. Months later, I saw another news story. A little boy in the next county had died from a dosage error. The anchor called it an isolated incident. The same phrase they used for me. I turned off the TV, sat on the floor, and stayed there until the light changed outside. You'd think pain fades, but it doesn't. It only changes form. It learns to whisper instead of scream. Then it finds a new way to speak. Mine learned to use a phone. 10 years passed before I tried to join the living again. A counselor suggested a support group called Parents of Angels. I didn't like the name, but I went. The meetings were held in the basement of a small church, where coffee tasted like ashes and chairs squeaked when you shifted. There were about 15 of us. Different ages, different stories, same emptiness behind the eyes. We took turns sharing how we lost our children. When it was my turn, I couldn't speak. The man beside me touched my shoulder and said, "You don't have to." His name was Martin Hale. He'd lost his teenage son in a car crash. He had the kind of voice that made you listen even when he said nothing important. After the meeting, he walked me to my car and said, "It gets quieter." Not better, just quieter. We started talking after meetings. Sometimes we met at the park for coffee. For the first time in years, I laughed. Not because something was funny, but because silence had company. Martin reminded me that grief doesn't have to be private. We visited cemeteries together, each carrying flowers for our kids. On Lydia's birthday, he brought her yellow tulips. He didn't say much, he didn't have to. For a while, I believed I was healing. But healing has sharp edges. It began one night when I walked past Lydia's room and found the window open. I hadn't opened it in months. The air was cold, and her old music box sat on the dresser, lid closed, silent. When I came back with a blanket, the tune was playing softly, the same one I used to wind for her before bed. I turned it off and checked for drafts, but the window was latched. The next night, it played again. I told Martin. He tried to reason it out, said it could be temperature, pressure, or maybe the spring inside had loosened. But when he visited and heard it himself, his face changed. He left early that day and never brought it up again. The next week, a picture frame fell from the hallway shelf. Glass shattered across the floor. It was Lydia's photo, the one from her 12th birthday party. I picked it up, bleeding from the cut, and saw that the frame hadn't slipped. The nail was still firm in the wall. That's when Martin stopped answering my calls. People at the group said he needed space. I knew better. He thought I was losing it. The meetings got awkward. Conversations shifted when I walked in. Someone said, "She talks to her daughter's ghost." I pretended not to hear. I quit the group. I told myself I didn't need them, but I did. The loneliness came back twice as strong, like it had been waiting outside the whole time. Sometimes I still imagine Martin walking up my porch with coffee, ready to talk like before. Instead, there's just the sound of the wind and that music box, playing on its own every few nights. If you've ever lost people because they couldn't handle your pain, type yes in the comments. Some grief scares others more than death itself. I used to think I was crazy. Now I think maybe crazy is what happens when the world refuses to believe your truth. And soon, that truth would ring loud enough for everyone to hear. It was one of those nights when the silence feels too heavy to sleep through. The clock on my nightstand glowed 2:59 a.m. I remember because I'd been staring at it, waiting for time to move. Then, as the minute changed to 3 o'clock, my phone lit up. The screen burned through the darkness, and for a second I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It said, "Lydia calling." Her picture, the one from her 12th birthday, filled the screen, smiling, cake crumbs on her face, frozen in a time that no longer existed. I sat up slowly, afraid that even breathing too hard would make the image vanish. The phone vibrated in my hand, each buzz hitting my chest like a heartbeat. I wanted to answer. Every part of me screamed to hear her voice, even if it was just a glitch replaying an old voicemail. But something deeper, something older, held me still. The call rang for exactly 20 seconds, then stopped. The screen went black. I stared at my reflection on the dark screen, trying to make sense of what I'd just seen. Then I opened the call log. Nothing. No record, no number. As if it never happened. My hands were shaking. I opened the settings, checked recent calls, and even searched through deleted history. Nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed until the sun began to rise, half expecting the phone to light up again. It didn't. The next day, I convinced myself it was a dream. Maybe I'd fallen asleep with the phone in my hand. Maybe my mind had created it to fill the emptiness that had lived inside me since the hospital. But when night came, I couldn't sleep. I stayed in bed with the light on, phone beside me. At exactly 3 a.m., the light flickered once, then the ringtone began again. Lydia calling. Same picture. Same vibration rhythm. I whispered her name, afraid to touch the screen. Tears blurred my vision. I let it ring. This time, it lasted longer. 30 seconds. Then silence. I picked up the phone and checked again. Nothing in the call history. I even took a screenshot, just to prove it had happened. When I looked at it a few minutes later, the image had disappeared, file not found. If you were me, what would you have done? Answered it? Or let it keep calling? Tell me in the comments, because what happened next tore open 17 years of buried pain. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker through the fog. Around dawn, I saw my reflection in the glass. I looked nothing like the woman I used to be. I promised myself that if it rang again, I would answer. No matter what. The following night, I turned off all lights, placed the phone on the bed, and waited. I kept my eyes open until the numbers on the clock blurred. At exactly 3 a.m., the phone lit up again. Lydia calling. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my ears. I reached out, but before my thumb could touch the screen, the call ended. The light from the phone stayed on a little longer this time. The wallpaper flickered, and for a split second, I saw her reflection instead of mine. A child's silhouette standing behind me in the screen's glow. I turned around fast. Nothing. That night, I sat on the floor until morning, gripping the phone like a lifeline. For the first time in years, I prayed. I didn't ask for peace. I asked for proof. And at 3:06 a.m. the next morning, proof came. The call came again, this time with sound. I'd been sitting on the bed, half asleep, when the ringtone sliced through the dark. I didn't hesitate. I pressed accept. The screen froze, then glitched. For a moment, all I heard was static. Then a voice. Mom. I don't have much time. It was soft, trembling. Childlike. I pressed the phone harder against my ear. Lydia? Mom, where am I? The sound wasn't robotic or recorded, it was her. That same faint lisp she had when she lost her front tooth, the tiny breath between her words. Before I could say another word, the call ended. The room was silent again, but my body wasn't. My hand shook so violently that the phone nearly slipped. I replayed the call. Only static. I spent the rest of the night pacing the house, replaying it again and again, as if the words might come back. The next morning, I drove straight to the phone company office. The woman behind the counter looked half asleep until I placed the phone in front of her and said, "Someone called me from this number." She checked the system, typing slowly, eyes squinting at the screen. Then she said, "Ma'am, there's no record of any incoming calls at that time." I showed her the screenshot. She leaned closer. "That number's been disconnected since 2008. She asked if I wanted to report harassment. I said no. When I left, the sky was overcast. The kind of gray that matched the pavement, making it impossible to tell where the road ended and the air began. All day, I replayed that voice in my head. Mom, where am I? It wasn't a hallucination. It wasn't my imagination. It was her. That night, I set the phone on record mode. If it happened again, I'd capture it. At 2:58 a.m., the house seemed to tighten around me. The air got colder. The refrigerator hummed louder. I could feel something coming. When 3 o'clock hit, the ringtone echoed again. Lydia calling. I answered instantly. Static again. Faint, rhythmic, like a heartbeat buried under white noise. Then something else. Beeping. Short, repetitive, electronic beeps. The sound was distant but familiar. It took me a few seconds to recognize it. A hospital monitor. I froze. Lydia? The sound cut off. Then her voice came again, weaker this time, Mom, please. The call ended. I looked at the screen. The timer stopped at 0:06. 6 seconds. My hands were slick with sweat. I saved the recording immediately, naming it Call 1. Then I checked the timestamp, 3:06 a.m. That number. The same time printed on her death certificate. The next morning, I called Officer Hunt. He'd handled the case years ago and still worked in town. When I told him about the call, he paused before answering. Elaine, phones can be spoofed. People can make it look like any number. Probably some sick prank. But who would do that? I asked. He sighed. You'd be surprised what people do for attention or revenge. Let it go. Don't answer next time. I hung up before he could finish. Later that afternoon, I played the recording again. The static filled the room, harsh and uneven. But under it, if I listened close enough, I could hear faint voices. Not Lydia's, others. A woman crying. A machine alarm. A muffled code blue. The sounds of a hospital. I pressed pause. The recording length read 6 seconds, but the waveform showed 12. Half of it hidden under silence. If you've ever felt something you couldn't explain, something that logic couldn't fix, type yes in the comments. I want to know if anyone else has felt the same chill I felt that night. I sat back, the phone still in my hand. Outside, dawn crept through the blinds. The street was empty, but for a moment, I thought I saw a shadow pass by the window, small, fast, like someone running. I checked the time again. 3:06 a.m. That's when I realized it wasn't just a call. It was a message. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know what came next. The morning after the second call, I drove straight to the police station. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles went white. I hadn't slept, my eyes were dry, swollen, and bloodshot. Every time I blinked, I heard her voice again, soft, scared, asking where she was. Officer Hunt was still there after all these years. Older, heavier, with a receding hairline and that same tired look cops get after seeing too much. When he saw me standing at his desk, he sighed before I even spoke. "Elaine," he said, folding his arms. "It's been a while. I need you to trace a call." He motioned for me to sit. "Start from the beginning." I told him everything, the 3 a.m. calls, the static, the voice, the recording, the hospital sounds. I even showed him the timestamp on my phone, 3:06 a.m. He listened quietly, clicking his pen, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he let out a slow breath. "You said the number was your daughter's old one?" "Yes. The one she had before." "I remember." He typed something on his computer, frowning. "That number's been out of service for years. No active subscriber, no carrier routing. So how is it calling me?" He didn't answer right away. "There are ways to make numbers appear that way. It's called spoofing. Scammers do it. Sometimes they mimic old numbers pulled from data leaks. Probably someone's idea of a joke." I shook my head. "It wasn't a joke. I know my daughter's voice." "Grief does strange things," he said gently. "It can replay old memories, even change how you hear sounds." I leaned forward. "Officer Hunt, please. You heard about St. Christopher's. You know what they did." "I know," he said softly. "And I also know they paid their price." "No," I said. "They paid their way out. There's a difference." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right. I'll log a report. I'll ask our tech unit to pull your call records, see what shows up. But Elaine, don't get your hopes up. Sometimes technology just does weird things." He gave me a form to sign and told me to call if it happened again. That night, I didn't wait for 3 a.m. I sat in my living room with the lights off, phone on the table, recorder app open. The house creaked with every shift of the wind. The air felt heavier, thicker, like someone else was in the room. At 3 o'clock, the phone lit up. "Lydia calling." I answered before it could ring twice. "Lydia?" I whispered. Silence. Then breathing. Slow, shaky breathing. I froze, pressing the phone closer to my ear. "Lydia, it's Mom. I'm here." The breathing stopped. Then, faintly, a sound, metal against metal, like a door latch closing. And then the call ended. I stared at the screen. Call duration, 007. This time, I felt anger rising where fear used to be. I called Hunt right then. It was 3:10 a.m., but he answered on the second ring. You said to call if it happened again, I told him. He groaned. Elaine, it's the middle of the night. She breathed, Hunt. I heard her breathing. He paused. Did you record it? Yes. Send it over. I'll get someone to look at it in the morning. I hung up and sent the file. Then I sat on the couch, shaking, listening to the replay. The breathing was faint, but it was there. Not a glitch. Not a loop. Real. You tell me, if you heard your dead child breathing on the phone, would you call it a prank? Or would you start believing something bigger was happening? Comment your honest thought, because I need to know if I'm losing my mind. At sunrise, I finally fell asleep. I dreamt of the hospital hallway, lights flickering, Lydia's voice echoing down the corridor, Mom, where am I? And a figure turning the corner before I could reach her. When I woke up, the phone was in my hand again, still recording. And outside, the mail carrier had left an envelope from St. Christopher's Hospital with no return address. Inside was a blank sheet of paper. By Monday morning, I decided to see Dr. Holloway again. I hadn't been to therapy in nearly 2 years, not since I convinced myself I could handle the silence on my own. Turns out silence isn't something you handle, it handles you. The clinic smelled of coffee and lemon cleaner. When she called my name, I followed her into that same warm office with beige walls and soft lamps. You look tired, she said. I haven't slept much. She waited for me to sit, then opened her notebook. Tell me what's been happening. So I did. The calls, the recordings, the timestamps. I showed her the audio file of the static and the breathing. She listened with her head tilted, eyes thoughtful. When it ended, she said quietly, You believe this was Lydia? I don't just believe it, I said. I know it. Dr. Holloway leaned forward. Elaine, sometimes when we experience loss, especially loss like yours, the mind creates what the heart can't accept. It tries to close the gap with sensory memories. Voices. Sounds. Patterns that feel real. I shook my head. This isn't my mind playing tricks. She said something only she could have known. What did she say? She asked, Where am I? And she said, Bluebirds never cry. Dr. Holloway's pen stopped mid-word. What does that mean? It was part of a lullaby I made up when she was little, I said. No one else knew about it. Not her teachers, not my ex, no one. She wrote something in her notes but didn't read it aloud. Have you experienced any stressors recently? Anything that could have triggered a memory response? I've been alone for 17 years. My life is a trigger. She smiled softly but didn't argue. I understand why this feels real. But perception can be persuasive. The human brain can replicate familiar voices during high emotional states. It's called an auditory flashback. Then how do you explain the timestamp? The 3:06 a.m.? She hesitated. Coincidence. I laughed bitterly. You sound like the police. Her expression stayed calm. It doesn't mean I'm right. I just need you to stay grounded. Keep recording, but don't feed the cycle. Sometimes the act of waiting creates the illusion itself. As I left, she squeezed my hand. Elaine, whatever this is, it's rooted in something you haven't finished processing. That night, I went home and played the recording again. The static grew louder toward the end, like it was building to something. I adjusted the volume and heard a faint echo buried deep in the sound, soft beeping, like a monitor. Then, right before it ended, a voice. Not Lydia's. A man's voice, whispering. She wasn't supposed to die. I nearly dropped the phone. The next morning, I returned to Dr. Holloway's office unannounced. I told her what I'd heard. She frowned and replayed the file herself, adjusting her speakers. She heard it too, faint, low, undeniable. Her face went pale. I'll have someone from our sound lab take a look, she said, though I could tell she was shaken. After I left, she sat at her desk for a long time, staring at her notes. Then she called her colleague at another hospital. "I just met with a patient named Elaine Porter," she said quietly. "Her case reminds me of the Reynolds incident 15 years ago." A pause on the other end. "The one where the mother kept getting calls from her son's number?" Dr. Holloway nodded. "Right before the malpractice cover-up came out." When she hung up, she stared at the phone for a long moment, as if waiting for it to ring. I hadn't been near St. Christopher's Hospital in 17 years. Just driving down the road toward it made my stomach twist. The same white sign still stood at the entrance, the same slogan beneath it, "Where compassion meets care." The irony hit harder than the memory. Inside, everything looked smaller. The lobby fountain still trickled, soft and rhythmic, like it had the night Lydia died. The receptionist desk was new, the colors brighter, but the air still smelled of disinfectant and coffee. A nurse passing by stopped and looked at me for a long time. Then recognition softened her face. "Mrs. Porter?" Her voice was careful, unsure if she should say my name out loud. I nodded. "Yes. I'm Evelyn," she said. "I was here that night." She looked older now, hair streaked with gray, hands trembling slightly. "They remodeled last year," she said, glancing around. "We found something during renovations. I didn't know if I should keep it or throw it away." She opened her pocket and pulled out a small, cracked plastic tag, faded pink, with my daughter's name printed across it, Lydia Porter. I froze. The barcode was half scratched, but the date on the tag stopped my breath. Date of death, March 15th. It was wrong. Lydia died on March 14th. Evelyn must have seen my reaction because her eyes filled with tears. "We found it in an unused storage cabinet," she said quietly. "I thought you'd want it." I took it in my shaking hand. The tag was cold, as if it had been sitting in a freezer. When I asked how it ended up there, she shook her head. "That cabinet was sealed for years. No one knows who opened it. The key went missing after the renovation started." I thanked her and left before my legs gave out. Outside, the fountain kept flowing, the same sound it made the night my child's heart stopped. Driving home, the tag sat on the seat beside me. I couldn't stop glancing at it, at that wrong date, March 15th. What happened after midnight? Why change it? When I reached home, I placed the tag on Lydia's dresser, next to the music box. The moment I did, the entire house felt still, no hum, no flicker, no faint static. The silence was unnerving, but in a way, peaceful. That night, for the first time in weeks, my phone stayed dark. Number 3 a.m. ringing. No static. No voice. You tell me, would you have felt relief or fear? Comment your honest take, because I didn't know which one to trust. Days passed. The phone stayed quiet. The air felt heavier but calm, like something waiting. The stillness pressed on my chest every night. I started to wonder if taking the tag home had broken some invisible rule. Maybe Lydia's spirit had found rest now that her name was returned. Or maybe someone, somewhere, didn't want me looking any further. On the fourth day, I opened the dresser to move the tag, and found it gone. I searched everywhere. Under the bed. In drawers. Behind picture frames. Nothing. That same evening, when I stepped outside to bring in the mail, a white envelope sat on the porch, no stamp, no address, just my name written in black ink. I knew before I opened it that peace never lasts. The envelope was thin, folded once at the edge. I tore it open carefully, half expecting dust to fall out. Instead, there was a single sheet of paper, a printed medical form from St. Christopher's Hospital, stamped in red with the word void. I smoothed it out on the kitchen table. My hands trembled as I read. 3 patient names were listed. Lydia Porter. Caleb Reynolds. Maya Hensley. All marked deceased. All the same admission date. All listed as adverse drug reaction. The date, March 14th to 15th, 2008. My head buzzed. Reynolds. The name sounded familiar. I flipped through an old binder where I'd kept notes from the Parents of Angels group. There it was, Caleb Reynolds, the boy whose mother used to cry quietly during every session but never spoke. I called Officer Hunt again. When he answered, his tone was tired. Elaine? I got something. A medical record. 3 children. Same night, same cause of death. Where'd you get it? It was on my porch. Anonymous? Yes. He sighed. Then it's not admissible. Could be fake. Don't jump to conclusions. You think I printed it myself? I'm saying someone's playing with you. Until I can verify it, I can't open a case. Can't or won't. He didn't answer. That night, the house stayed cold. Too cold. I sat awake at the table staring at the form. The red void mark bled slightly through the paper, like it had been stamped in a hurry. I turned it over, and faintly, under the light, I saw part of a note written in pencil, the words, "They never fixed it." I didn't know what that meant, but I was going to find out. The next morning, I drove 2 hours to the address I found for the Reynolds family. Their house was small, overgrown with weeds, the kind of place grief builds around itself like armor. A woman answered the door, older, thinner than I remembered. She looked at me, puzzled. Mrs. Reynolds? She hesitated, then nodded. I'm Elaine Porter, I said. Lydia's mother. Recognition softened her eyes. Oh. Yes. I remember you. I think our children were in the hospital the same night, I said, showing her the form. She looked at it, then back at me. You shouldn't have come. Her voice shook. We got letters too. Years ago. White envelopes, no names. My husband wanted to go public, but someone warned us. Told us to let it go. Who warned you? She looked around, lowered her voice. A nurse. She said what happened wasn't just a mistake, it was covered up. Why would she tell you that? Because she lost her job after refusing to change a chart. I leaned closer. Do you remember her name? She hesitated. Meyer. Dr. Meyer, maybe? Or someone close to him. I'm not sure anymore. My heart stopped for a beat. Dr. Meyer? She nodded slowly. He disappeared not long after. They said he moved away, but no one knows for sure. I left the house shaking. The sky looked the same as it had 17 years ago, too bright, too calm, pretending nothing happened. When I got home, another envelope was waiting on my porch. Same handwriting. Same weight. Inside was a hospital report, half blacked out, showing dosage logs for the same 3 patients. The initials DM appeared next to all of them. Dr. Meyer. I looked at the timestamp in the top corner. 3:06 a.m. That night, I didn't wait for the phone to ring. I turned it off and sat in the dark, staring at the tackless dresser. The silence around me felt too deliberate, like someone, or something, was watching, waiting for my next move. If this were you, would you keep digging? Or would you finally stop? Tell me what you'd do, because the truth was starting to look like a weapon, and I wasn't sure who it was pointed at, me, or the people who took my child. The next morning, I decided to return to St. Christopher's one last time. Because if the dead were done speaking, then the living still had a lot to answer for. The second envelope sat unopened on the table for hours. I kept circling it like it was something alive. I'd already seen enough paper with Lydia's name on it to last a lifetime, medical reports, death certificates, condolence cards, but this one felt different. The handwriting wasn't rushed. It was neat. Intentional. Whoever sent it knew exactly what they were doing. By evening, I poured myself a cup of coffee I didn't drink and finally tore it open. Inside wasn't a form this time. It was a printed article draft, unpublished, and signed. The headline read, "The Missing Files of St. Christopher's, 17 Years of Silence." My breath caught. Beneath the title was a single name, Caleb Ross, journalist. The story referenced unreported pediatric deaths connected to experimental antibiotics and anonymous whistleblowers within the hospital administration. One line made me sit up straighter. One surviving staff member, listed in records as Dr. M, disappeared shortly after filing a confidential complaint to the State Health Board, alleging that senior administrators destroyed patient data to avoid legal exposure. Dr. M. Dr. Meyer. Before I could process it, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding. Hello? A man's voice came through, calm but firm. Mrs. Porter? Yes? This is Caleb Ross. I'm sorry to call out of nowhere. I think we need to talk. For a moment, I couldn't speak. You wrote this, I said, my voice trembling. I did. And I believe someone wants you to see it. He explained that he'd been researching medical malpractice cases in the region for months, and Lydia's name kept resurfacing. Each time he requested files, parts of her record were missing or mislabeled. One file listed her death date as March 15th, not March 14th. That date again. How did you get my number? I asked. I didn't, he said. You got mine. The line went quiet for a beat. I'm sorry? He hesitated. 2 nights ago, I got a voicemail from a blocked number. It was 6 seconds long. A woman's voice said, she deserves the truth. Then it hung up. My grip tightened on the phone. You think that voice belongs to my daughter? I don't know, he said softly. But it's connected. The call came from a ghost route, same kind used when numbers are hidden by outdated telecom servers. The timing matches your reports. How do you know my reports? He sighed. Because Officer Hunt sent them to me. That name stung. He what? I've been trying to get his cooperation on my article. He told me you'd been receiving strange calls. I asked if he could share your recordings so my audio analyst could review them. He refused, but he did tell me enough to look into your case. My pulse quickened. Why would a journalist care about this now? Because the hospital's still active, he said. And people are still dying under suspicious circumstances. 3 families in the last 2 years have reported similar cases: wrong dosage, missing data, sealed settlements. It's happening again. The silence between us felt like a wall. I could hear his breathing through the receiver, steady but heavy. What do you want from me? I asked. I want to meet, he said. Tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. at the coffee shop across from the courthouse. I hesitated. I don't know if I can trust you. He lowered his voice. I understand. But before you decide, you should listen to the voicemail I got. He texted me an audio file. I played it through my headphones. At first, static. Then a faint, desperate whisper, she deserves the truth. The voice wasn't Lydia's, but it wasn't entirely unfamiliar either. Who is that? I asked. That's what I need your help to find out, he said. The next morning, I almost didn't go. The last thing I wanted was to reopen wounds that never healed. But the thought of that voice, that single sentence, wouldn't let me rest. The coffee shop was half empty when I walked in. A man in his mid-30s sat by the window, laptop open, papers spread out around him. When he saw me, he stood quickly. Mrs. Porter? He was younger than I expected. Clean-shaven, with tired eyes and a notebook full of scribbles. The kind of person who'd rather ask questions than answer them. He motioned for me to sit. Thank you for coming. I sat across from him, folding my hands to hide the tremor. You said you had information. He nodded and slid a folder toward me. Inside were printouts of internal emails, staff memos, and complaint forms, all from St. Christopher's. Where did you get these? Freedom of information requests, he said. Most came redacted, but a few lines slipped through. He pointed to one email chain dated March 16, 2008, the day after Lydia's death. It read, Ensure all pediatric trial data is backed up and untraceable. Dispose of hard copies. Dr. M's notes should be removed from the archive immediately. Dr. M. I whispered again. He nodded. That's our missing man. Dr. Meyer filed a confidential complaint before he disappeared. He claimed the hospital was running a quiet drug trial on pediatric patients without parental consent. I felt my throat tighten. What kind of trial? He flipped to another page, a pharmaceutical company letterhead. An antibiotic called Zolverin, still in pre-approval testing back then. According to these records, St. Christopher's used it on at least 7 children, listing it as a standard antibiotic substitute. Lydia wasn't sick enough for that, I said. She had the flu. I know, he said. But it looks like her chart was altered after her death to justify the use. He slid over a photocopy of a patient record. Lydia's name was there, but parts were crossed out and rewritten. The line that broke me: patient responded negatively to treatment, reaction noted at 3:06 a.m. Why 3:06? I whispered. That's the same time Dr. Meyer listed in every file, Caleb said. That's when the experimental dosage was administered. My hand shook. You're saying those calls, those timestamps, they're tied to this? He nodded slowly. Maybe someone is trying to finish what Dr. Meyer started, to expose the truth. I stared at the window, at the people walking past, unaware of the world collapsing in front of me. You think the calls are coming from someone inside the hospital? I don't think they're supernatural, he said carefully. But I do think someone's using Lydia's number to send a message. Whoever it is, they know your history, your grief, and how to reach you. Then why me? Why not the police? Because the police don't listen to grieving mothers, he said quietly. I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. He leaned forward. There's more. I traced the voicemail I got, the one saying, she deserves the truth. It was sent through a relay system in Denver. Colorado, I said. He nodded. Where Dr. Meyer relocated under a new name, Daniel Mercer. He practiced there for 5 years, then vanished after another complaint was filed. No forwarding address, no record of death. It's like he disappeared off the map. I felt dizzy. So what do we do? I need your help connecting the missing dots, he said. I think you were meant to find those envelopes. Someone's guiding you, and now they're guiding me. I glanced at his folder again. One document stood out, a printed note, barely legible. They lied. She wasn't supposed to die. My hands trembled. Where did you get this? It came in the mail the same day I called you. We sat there for a long time in silence. Outside, a light drizzle began to fall, tapping gently on the glass. Finally, Caleb said, I'm going back to the hospital tonight. I have a contact in the records department who's agreed to meet me after hours. You can come if you want. I hesitated. If this is real, it's dangerous. He smiled faintly. Truth usually is. I don't know what convinced me, maybe the look in his eyes, or maybe the way the rain hit the window at that exact moment, but I agreed. Fine, I said. We go together. The hospital parking lot looked emptier than I remembered. Only a few lights glowed in the upper floors. We parked behind the side entrance, where deliveries came in after hours. Caleb checked his phone. My contact said the night clerk will leave the basement door unlocked. We slipped inside quietly. The smell of bleach hit me first, sharp, sterile, unforgiving. The sound of dripping water echoed through the hall. Caleb led the way to the old records room, a long corridor filled with metal shelves and boxes. The light above flickered, humming faintly. This section hasn't been digitized yet, he whispered. We might find the original reports here. I ran my hand along the boxes, the cardboard soft with age. Each label bore a date. Then I saw it, March 2008. We opened one box. Inside, stacks of patient files, hundreds of them. Caleb started flipping through, scanning each one under his flashlight. Then he froze. Here. He pulled out a manila folder. The tag read, Meyer, D., Internal Report, Confidential. Inside was a single-page memo written in tight, urgent handwriting. If you're reading this, it means I failed. They will bury everything. The truth lives in the timestamps. Find 306. At the bottom of the page was a small ink stamp. Filed by Dr. Daniel Mercer, alias. March 20, 2008. I stared at the words, the letter swimming before my eyes. The truth lives in the timestamps. Suddenly, the lights above flickered again. Then my phone buzzed. 3:06 a.m. Lydia calling. Caleb's eyes widened. Don't answer it. But I did. Static. Then a voice, trembling, breaking apart through the line. Mom, it's cold here. The sound sent ice through my veins. Caleb stared at me, pale as chalk. The line went dead. When I looked back at the folder, the memo inside was gone. You tell me, was it the hospital covering its tracks? Or was something else trying to make me listen? Comment what you think, because I still don't know which truth is more terrifying, the living or the dead. And as for Caleb Ross and me, that night was only the beginning. The next step would take us deeper into what St. Christopher's had been hiding all along. The night at St. Christopher's left me shaken. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flicker of the fluorescent light, heard the drip of water in the hall, and felt that same cold, static air from the moment the call came through. Find 306, the memo had said. Those words looped in my head until sunrise. By the time Caleb called the next morning, I'd already packed my bag, printed copies of the files we'd taken pictures of, and written down every timestamp on the call recordings. He sounded restless on the phone. Meet me at the county archives. They still keep microfilms from old hospital records. Why would the county have them? State law, he said. They're supposed to store duplicate files for public access, but half of them never make it to the system. Sometimes the older clerks keep things off record, especially if they know it's dirty. I didn't ask how he knew that. I just drove. The county archive sat behind the courthouse, an old brick building with ivy crawling up its sides and a rusted sign that read Records Department. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and old paper. A fan whirred slowly above the front desk, doing nothing to fight the stale heat. A woman sat behind the counter, gray hair pinned up, thick glasses perched at the tip of her nose. Her name tag read M.S. Gentry. Caleb introduced us. We're looking for medical logs from St. Christopher's Hospital, March 2008. Her eyes narrowed. Those are sealed. By who? He asked. She tilted her head. By the hospital board, under confidentiality. Caleb slid his press card across the desk. I'm a reporter investigating a public health issue. Patient data can be redacted, we only need access to dates and timestamps. She looked at the card, then at me. Something in her expression softened when she read my name. Porter, she said quietly. You're Lydia's mother. I nodded, throat tight. Mrs. Gentry stood slowly. Follow me. She led us through rows of metal filing cabinets to a small room in the back, lined with old computers and boxes stacked to the ceiling. Dust motes floated in the light coming through the narrow window. These are duplicates, she said. Supposed to be destroyed after digitization, but I keep things, just in case. She opened a drawer and pulled out a box labeled 2008, Pediatric Records. Inside were microfilm rolls, each marked with hospital dates. She placed one into the reader, flipped a switch, and the screen blinked to life, showing scanned pages of medical charts. Caleb scrolled through quickly, his journalist eyes scanning every line. Most of this looks routine, he murmured. Keep going, I said. He stopped suddenly. Here. Porter, Lydia. The record appeared, my daughter's name, her admission details, and that cursed timestamp. 3:06 a.m. But this version had something new, a signature at the bottom. Not Dr. Myers. Signed, Dr. D. Mercer. The alias he used in the hidden memo. Caleb took a photo. That's proof he altered the file himself after the incident. He must have been documenting something. We kept scrolling. Then Mrs. Gentry placed a hand on my shoulder. Look, she whispered. The next few charts were blacked out entirely. Names redacted, ages missing, but the patterns were clear. Every record listed fatal reaction, medication dosage error. Each dated March 14 to 15, 2008. Each death occurred between 3 a.m. and 3:10 a.m. Exactly the window my calls always came through. I felt my hands go cold. There were more, I whispered. It wasn't just Lydia. Caleb nodded grimly. And they all share one attending physician, Dr. Meyer. The old clerk's voice trembled. He wasn't the only one. The administration forced several doctors to sign falsified reports. They said the hospital's reputation was worth more than a few mistakes. I turned to her. You knew this? Her eyes glistened. I used to work in billing. I saw the settlements. Parents were paid to stay quiet. Every one of them signed non-disclosure agreements. Why didn't you come forward? Caleb asked. She looked down. Because people who talk don't stay safe long. Then she reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a small flash drive, wrapped in tissue paper. She pressed it into my hand. He left this for you. Who? I asked. Dr. Meyer. Or Mercer, whatever name he used. He mailed it to the records office the week before he disappeared. Said if anyone asked about the March deaths, to give it to the mother of Lydia Porter. I stared at the drive. It was small, silver, and slightly dented, with a strip of black tape across the top labeled 306. Mrs. Gentry's voice dropped to a whisper. Not all deaths were mistakes. Caleb swallowed hard. We should go. At home, I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It took a few seconds to load, then a folder appeared titled Proof. Inside were dozens of PDF files labeled by date, each corresponding to the week Lydia died. Caleb and I opened the first one. Redacted lines everywhere, but the sections left visible were enough to paint the story. Drug trial reference, ZLV03, pediatric antibiotic study. Unapproved use of medication. Dosage variance unreported. 3:06 a.m. administration log confirmed. The second file listed names, Porter, Lydia. Reynolds, Caleb. Hensley, Maya. Then 3 more I didn't recognize. 6 children. All within the same 48-hour period. I scrolled faster. The files became more erratic, as if someone had tried to delete them mid-upload. Then one document stood out. It wasn't redacted, it was a handwritten note scanned into the system. To whoever finds this, they told us to alter the timestamps. They said 3:06 didn't matter. But it matters. That's when the drug hit the bloodstream. That's when the seizures began. They said she wasn't supposed to die. None of them were. If the calls have started again, it means they're trying to finish what we couldn't. DM. The line "if the calls have started again" made my blood run cold. I looked at Caleb. He knew. He nodded. Maybe the calls are more than memory. Maybe they're a signal. We sat there in silence, listening to the hum of the laptop. Then I clicked open a video file inside the same folder. The title read, March_15_ security feed. The footage was grainy, timestamped 3:06 a.m. A hospital hallway. A woman in scrubs running past, shouting something we couldn't hear. 2 doctors followed, one of them clearly Meyer. He stopped, looked directly at the camera, and said something before the footage cut out. Caleb replayed it and zoomed in. Can we enhance the audio? I connected external speakers and raised the volume. The static cleared just enough to make out a phrase. We're out of time. Then, in the far corner of the frame, a hospital phone blinked, its red light flashing 3 times. The following night, the phone rang again. I hadn't told Caleb I'd been sleeping on the couch lately, afraid to stay in my bedroom. When the ringtone started, I didn't hesitate. I pressed record and answered. Static. Then, faintly, Mom. Lydia? Not safe, she whispered. Stop, looking. Then something else, a noise behind her voice, mechanical, rhythmic. I recognized it instantly, the beeping of a monitor. But this time, another sound joined in. Voices. More than one. Children crying. Lydia, where are you? I whispered. She didn't answer. The line cut. I sat frozen. The recording timer read 0:12. 12 seconds. When I replayed it, the background sound was gone. Only my own voice remained. The next day, Caleb showed up at my house unannounced. You need to see this, he said, holding his laptop open. The flash drive has a hidden folder. I missed it last night. Inside were sound files, dozens of them. Short bursts of static with embedded frequencies. His analyst friend had run a spectrogram and found a pattern, each frequency spike aligned with the exact second Lydia's calls had come through over the past month. This isn't random, he said. It's deliberate. I stared at the screen. Deliberate how? Someone, maybe Meyer, maybe someone else, set these files to ping through an automated signal that reroutes old phone numbers through dead telecom networks. The calls you've been getting? They're not ghosts. They're data signals, triggered remotely. Triggered by who? He hesitated. That's what we need to find out. The weight in my chest returned. So the voice. He shook his head. I don't know, Elaine. But if someone is using that voice, it means they had access to Lydia's hospital recordings, her intake audio, her voice files. The same ones that should have been deleted. I leaned back, my pulse hammering. You're saying someone took her voice and turned it into this? I'm saying someone wanted you to hear her again, so you'd start digging. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. And what happens when I find out who? Caleb looked at me, face unreadable. Then we make sure no one else buries the truth. That evening, after he left, I opened the flash drive again and replayed the files one by one. Every timestamp. Every faint beep. Every sound my mind tried to translate into something human. And in the last file, final entry _3-06.mp3, I heard something new. A man's voice, panicked, whispering, "It's too late. They're already inside the system." Then a child's cry. Then silence. The lights flickered in my living room. The laptop screen dimmed, then went black. When it came back on, a single line of text appeared across the center. 3:06 isn't when they died. It's when it began. I stared at the message, unable to move. The phone beside me buzzed once, then stopped. No number. No name. Just one notification, message failed to send. You tell me, if every call, every recording, every timestamp points to the same hour, what would you believe? That the dead are trying to speak, or that the living are still covering their crimes? Because as of that night, I wasn't sure which was more terrifying. And when the next call came, 3:06 on the dot, I didn't answer. I waited for the truth to come knocking instead. For the next 3 nights, I didn't sleep. The sound of silence had become the loudest thing in the house. I sat at my desk with the recorder app running, a notepad beside me, and Lydia's old photo standing upright under the lamplight. Caleb kept calling to check on me, insisting I let him set up equipment, signal trackers, recording devices, but I refused. I didn't want strangers turning my home into an investigation site. I didn't want this to feel like a case. It was personal. Still, every part of me knew it wasn't over. The flash drive message, 3:06 isn't when they died. It's when it began. Had burned into my mind. I kept hearing those words whenever I blinked. That night, I made myself a promise. Whatever called me at that hour, I'd face it. No more running, no more fear. I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt. It was 2:45 a.m. when I felt the air shift. The house grew colder, as though something invisible had exhaled across the walls. The refrigerator stopped humming. Even the clock above the door froze for a second. I hit record on both my phone and an old cassette player. My voice was trembling, but I spoke anyway. If you call again, I'm ready. 3 minutes later, the ringtone shattered the quiet. Lydia calling. The glow of the screen washed my face in pale blue light. My hand shook, but I forced myself to answer. Lydia? Static at first. Then a faint whimper, like a child crying from under a blanket. Mom, it's cold here. My chest tightened. Where are you, baby? The line hissed softly. Then came the words that made the hair on my arms rise. Don't let them forget me. My voice cracked. I won't. I promise. Tell me who's doing this. Please. There was a pause, an awful, hollow pause, and then a new sound. Not Lydia's voice this time. Something else. Typing. The faint click of a keyboard, steady and mechanical. Who is that? I shouted into the receiver. No answer. Just the sound of keys pressing faster, overlapping with the low hum of static. Then the line cut. The phone went dark. I stared at the screen, heart hammering, unable to breathe. The call log still showed nothing, no incoming number, no duration. When I checked the recorder app, the file was there. Call 5_3-06.mp3. I listened once. Twice. Each time, the same chilling whisper, Lydia's plea, and then that strange typing at the end. I sent the file to Caleb with a short message. She spoke again. There's something else in the background. Find out what it is. He called an hour later, his voice sharp and awake. Elaine, where did this come from? You know where. I mean, the frequency, it's not normal. There's an extra audio layer embedded inside. Whoever sent this knows how to hide data in sound. What kind of data? He hesitated. I'm running it through a decoder right now. It might take a while. I waited, pacing my living room as he worked. My nerves were stretched thin, every creak in the floor made me jump. Finally, he said, got it. There's a voice under the static. It's faint, but listen to this. He played a section of the recording through his speakers. At first, just white noise. Then, clear as glass, a man's voice whispered 2 words. They lied. My stomach dropped. You're sure that's what it says? Positive. I cleaned it up with a spectral filter. You can even hear keystrokes matching the rhythm of the words. Whose voice is it? I compared it to the audio from the security footage we found at the hospital. He paused. It's Meyer. I gripped the edge of the table. He's dead. Caleb exhaled. Maybe. But if he isn't, he's the one behind the calls. He explained that the flash drive had contained an outdated encryption format used in early hospital data servers. It allowed someone to access internal communication lines remotely, if they had administrator credentials. Meaning what? I asked. Meaning someone with access to the hospital's old server could technically mask their calls through inactive numbers, he said. They could take Lydia's disconnected line and reroute it as a signal carrier. It would look like her number was calling when it was really just a ghost file running through their system. You're saying a person is doing this? He hesitated. Yes. But it's not just a prank. They'd need full clearance to pull it off. Who would even want to? Someone trying to keep you from digging, or someone trying to push you further. After we hung up, I played the file again. They lied. The words repeated in my mind like a curse. It couldn't be random. Meyer had filed that memo 17 years ago. He'd known about the dosage cover-up, about the timestamp, about everything. And now, his voice was crawling through my phone, buried under my daughter's. I opened my laptop and searched for Dr. Daniel Mercer, Meyer's new identity. There were no recent records, no obituary, nothing. The last trace was an online forum thread from 8 years earlier. The post read, "To anyone investigating St. Christopher's, find the pattern. 306 isn't a time. It's a file path. A file path." I copied the text, then searched for 306 in the flash drive directory. Hidden among the folders was one labeled root_306. Inside it, 7 encrypted documents, all labeled with initials. Each one matched the last names from the death records. I clicked the first file. Password protected. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I froze. It was 3:06 a.m. again. Without thinking, I answered. "Who are you?" No voice this time. Only typing. Then a single line of text appeared on my laptop screen, auto-typed across the open document. Stop. The typing stopped. The call ended. The next morning, Caleb arrived with his laptop and coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "I ran deeper analysis," he said, setting up his computer. "Whoever's doing this is connecting through the hospital's mainframe, but using a proxy network based in Denver." "Denver," I whispered. "Colorado. Where Meyer disappeared." He nodded. "It's all linked. But here's the strange part, the server access logs show a user with the ID DM03 logged in last week. Dr. Meyer's initials." "Yes, but that ID was deactivated in 2009. So either someone reactivated it or he's still alive," I finished. We stared at each other. Caleb rubbed his temples. "This is bigger than I thought. If this gets out, the hospital's entire network could be implicated. Their trial data, settlements, everything. Then we expose it," I said. "All of it." He gave a weary smile. "You sound like a reporter now." "I sound like a mother who's done being afraid." That evening, we met at his office downtown. He'd rented a small space above a bakery, walls lined with notes, maps, red strings connecting names and dates. It looked like chaos, but to him, it was a roadmap. On one board, he'd circled every case connected to St. Christopher's between 2006 and 2010. Each one marked by the same pattern: late-night administration, pediatric patient, and reaction at 3:06. "They didn't just cover up Lydia's death," he said. "They erased an entire study." He showed me another document, a patient intake log from March 2008 with blanked-out names. When he inverted the colors, faint handwriting appeared underneath the redactions: "Porter file incomplete. Voice sample archived per protocol." "Voice sample," I repeated slowly. "You mean they recorded her?" "Every patient in that trial was monitored through audio and biometric tracking," Caleb said. "They used the hospital's internal communication system to log reactions. That's how they got the recording someone's now using." I sat down hard. "So when I hear her voice, it's from those logs," he said gently. "Someone recovered them. Then who's sending them to me?" He hesitated, then turned the monitor toward me. "That's what scares me most. The activity logs show the access is coming from inside the hospital right now. As in, present day." My throat went dry. "You mean someone there is still covering this up? Or trying to confess?" We listened again to the fifth call. The static, the words, the typing. I asked him to slow it down to half speed. At first it just deepened the noise. But then, under Lydia's last sentence, we both heard something new, a faint echo behind her voice. A man's whisper, "Tell her where." Caleb looked at me. "Where what?" I didn't answer. Because suddenly I knew. The hospital's basement. The storage room where we'd found Meyer's memo was labeled Records B, Archive. But in the security footage from the flash drive, that wasn't the same corridor. There was another section, a door marked Lab 306. What if that's what he meant? I said. 306 isn't just a time or file, it's a location. Caleb's eyes widened. A lab. He grabbed his keys. We're going back tonight. The storm rolled in just after midnight. Rain hammered the windshield as we drove toward St. Christopher's. The hospital loomed against the dark sky like a monument to everything I'd lost. We parked behind the loading dock again, slipped through the side door Caleb had used before, and crept down the stairs to the sublevel. Most of the lights were off, the halls echoing with our footsteps. When we reached the end corridor, the old plaque on the door came into view, faded, half-peeled, but still visible, Lab 306. Caleb turned the handle. It creaked open. The smell hit first, chemical, metallic, faintly sweet, like cleaning fluid and rust. Inside were rows of old monitors, file cabinets, and one large machine humming quietly in the corner. A red light blinked on its screen. Caleb approached slowly. This shouldn't even have power. He tapped a few keys. The monitor flickered, revealing a login prompt, user ID, DM03. I felt the phone vibrate in my pocket. The screen glowed. Lydia calling. I answered without hesitation. I'm here. Static filled the room, and then, over the speakers, the machine responded with the same voice. My daughter's voice. Mom, they're watching. Caleb froze. It's linked to the network. The call's routing through this machine. The red light blinked faster. The hum deepened. Then, through the static, another voice layered over hers, older, male, desperate. Meyer, Caleb whispered. The voice rasped, you're not supposed to be here. They're still here. Leave, before. The connection cut out. The light on the monitor turned green. Caleb stared at the screen. It's uploading something. A progress bar appeared, transfer, 1%. 2%. 3%. Uploading where? I asked. Offsite server, he said. Someone set it to release files automatically if the system's accessed. I looked at the red light, now blinking faster. Then maybe that's what this was all for. To get us here? To finish what he started, I said. The upload reached 100%. The machine beeped once and went dark. The phone in my hand buzzed again, one final text message. Thank you, Mom. The call history still showed nothing. Caleb exhaled. It's done. I turned off the phone and looked around the dark room. The hum had stopped. The silence felt different now, not empty, but complete. We didn't know then that the upload would reach journalists, lawyers, and regulators across the country within 48 hours. But in that moment, standing in that basement, I felt something shift inside me. Grief, finally, had a direction. You tell me, when the dead finally find their voice, is it haunting or justice? Comment your thoughts below. Because for me, that night was both. For the first time in 17 years, I woke up without fear. There were no calls that night. No static. No whispers. The air in the house felt light, as if someone had opened a window that had been sealed for years. But calm never lasts long when the truth has been buried. By noon, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. The sight of it made my stomach tighten. I stepped outside just as the door opened and Officer Hunt stepped out, looking 10 years older than the last time I saw him. His hair had thinned, and dark circles framed his eyes. Elaine, he said quietly. We need to talk. I crossed my arms. About what? You finally decide to believe me? He didn't answer. Instead, he held up a small evidence bag. Inside was a silver USB drive. The label read only one word, confession. This came to the station last night, he said. No return address. Just my name on the envelope. Who sent it? Don't know yet. but the postmark was from Denver. The name alone sent a chill through me. Dr. Meyer. He nodded. I think so. And you need to see what's on it. We sat at my kitchen table, the same place where I'd once cried over police reports and condolence cards. Hunt plugged the drive into his laptop, his fingers trembling slightly. A folder popped up immediately, to whom it may concern, DM. Inside were 2 files. One was a video labeled Personal Statement. The other, a folder of documents marked Trial Data _3-06. He clicked the video first. Static filled the screen for a moment, then an image appeared, a man sitting in a dimly lit room. I recognized him instantly. Dr. Meyer. Or Daniel Mercer, as he'd called himself later. His face was gaunt, eyes sunken, beard unkempt. He looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. My name is Dr. Frederick Meyer, he began, voice low and cracked. If you're watching this, I'm either dead or close to it. I've tried every channel I could to get this information out. No one listens. He took a deep breath. 17 years ago, St. Christopher's Hospital ran an unapproved antibiotic study on pediatric patients. The drug was called Zolverin. It was meant to treat respiratory infections, but early data showed severe neurotoxic reactions. The FDA halted trials, but St. Christopher's didn't stop. They repackaged the drug as a standard alternative treatment and continued to test it. He looked straight into the camera. His eyes were red, desperate. We were told to administer doses in small intervals, record vitals, and log everything at the same time, 3:06 a.m. That timestamp was the signal for synchronization. Every night, we entered fake vitals into the system to make it look like the patients were improving. But on March 14th, the reactions began. He paused, swallowed hard. 6 children. All under 13. One by one, they seized. We tried reversal agents, oxygen, defibrillation, nothing worked. They all flatlined within minutes. The drug had triggered catastrophic organ failure. My breath caught. Hunt stopped the video for a second, looking at me carefully. You want me to stop? I shook my head. Keep going. He pressed play. Meyer continued, voice breaking. The administration panicked. They ordered us to alter the times of death. To shift every record by several hours and destroy physical evidence. They said it would protect the hospital from lawsuits and preserve donor funding. I refused. But when I tried to file a report, they changed my credentials, locked me out of the system, and made me sign revised charts under pressure. He rubbed his face, shaking his head. I couldn't live with it. I made backups. I embedded the truth inside the hospital servers, hidden in the data frequencies tied to those timestamps, 3:06 a.m. I wanted to release it, but they were already watching me. So I encoded the files as automated transmissions that would send out periodic signals using the archived patient numbers. He looked directly into the camera again. If the system ever reactivates those signals, it means someone has reopened the file. It means the truth is trying to escape. He leaned forward, eyes glassy. Elaine Porter, if this reaches you, I am so sorry. Your daughter's death wasn't an accident. She was the first to react, and I failed to stop it. They silenced everyone who tried to speak. I went into hiding, but guilt followed me everywhere. I thought the calls would stop when I buried the data, but maybe it was never the data that haunted me. His lip trembled. I used Lydia's patient file as the root signal. Her name, her number, it was the first in the code. I chose her because she deserved to be remembered. Every 3:06 a.m. pulse was her name being sent back into the system, reminding it of what we did. The calls weren't her. They were my fault. The screen flickered, and he looked away, whispering something off camera. When he turned back, his face was pale, terrified. If they find this, they'll destroy it. But I've sent copies to law enforcement, journalists, anyone who might listen. If one reaches you, don't let them erase it again. The dead can't speak, but their data can. Then the video cut to black. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavier than grief. Finally, Hunt exhaled. Jesus. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying not to cry. So the calls, the voice, all of it, it wasn't Lydia? He shook his head slowly. No. It was him. His system. The transmissions he left behind were pinging through the old network, using Lydia's file as the base. Her number was just the vessel. I looked down at the phone lying on the table. Then who kept answering me? He didn't answer. Hunt opened the second folder. Dozens of documents appeared, each labeled with patient codes. Most were redacted, but one stood out, file_3-06_final_report.pdf. He clicked it open. Incident summary, date, March 14 to 15, 2008. Subject group, ZLV03 pediatric trials. Outcome, 6 fatalities due to respiratory and neural collapse. Action taken, records adjusted to reflect non-trial treatment. Timestamp alterations completed by administrative directive. Lead signatories, Dr. H. Collins, Drive S. Reed. Further down the page. Note, 3:06 a.m. confirmed a synchronization marker for test injections. The last line was a single sentence, handwritten. Truth buried is truth reborn. Hunt leaned back in his chair. That's a confession and a cover-up in one. I wiped my face, trying to steady my voice. So, every call I got, every whisper, every message, it was his system trying to release this? Yes, Hunt said quietly. The static, the breathing, the voice patterns, they were fragments of compressed data decompressing through the old telecom lines. When you answered, it reactivated the transmission cycle. I laughed weakly, half in disbelief. You're telling me I became part of his data dump? Exactly, he said. The moment you started recording, you were capturing his final signal. And the timestamp on every call, 3:06 a.m., wasn't just a coincidence. It was the real time those kids died. The one the hospital erased. I looked up at him. Then why now? Why would it start again after all these years? He rubbed his temples. Probably because the hospital's archive servers went through a renovation. When they restored the old files for digitization, they triggered the dormant protocol Meyer buried inside. It started resending his message. And the flash drive? The envelopes? He nodded toward the computer. Same source. Either Meyer before he died or someone who found his cache and decided to continue his work. My guess? He knew he wouldn't make it out alive, so he scattered everything, letters, drives, data triggers, hoping one would land in the right hands. I swallowed hard. Mine. Hunt nodded. Yours. We sat in silence for several minutes. The laptop screen dimmed, and the room filled with the faint buzz of the refrigerator. Then I asked the question that had haunted me since the first call. Do you think he's really dead? Hunt hesitated. The envelope was mailed from Denver last week. But the postmark date, it's from a P.O. box that's been inactive since 2014. Could be automated forwarding. Or someone using his identity. You mean he might still be alive? He sighed. Maybe. Or maybe this is the last echo of his guilt. He slid a small evidence bag across the table. Inside was a note, handwritten, folded once. This came with the USB. I think it's for you. I opened it carefully. Elaine, if you're reading this, it means the system found you before they found me. I didn't make the calls to hurt you. I made them so no one could forget her name. Lydia deserved better. So did you. Whatever happens next, know that the truth is free now. I'm sorry for everything. FM. The paper trembled in my hands. He turned my daughter into his message. Hunt's voice softened. And because of that, every lie they told will burn. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. You should get some rest. The Attorney General's office is already involved. The media will have this by morning. As he stepped outside, I called after him. Hunt? He turned. Do you think she forgives me? For not fighting sooner? He looked at me for a long time before answering. Maybe she's the reason any of this made it out. Maybe she already did. That night, I sat alone at the table again. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. I turned my phone face up, waiting for it to light. At exactly 3:06 a.m., it vibrated once. No ringtone this time. Just a silent notification. New voicemail. I pressed play. Static. Then, faintly, her voice. Mom, thank you. The line went dead. No number. No log. Just silence. I closed my eyes and whispered, "You're welcome." The clock ticked past 3:07. For the first time in 17 years, I didn't cry. Because the truth, once buried, had finally spoken. The headlines arrived before sunrise. 17 years of silence, the hidden files of St. Christopher's. Caleb's name was at the top, but the story belonged to every parent who'd been told to move on. By noon, every network in the country was running it. The leaked documents from Dr. Meyer's files, the falsified charts, the timestamp logs, the video confession, spread faster than anyone could contain. The story broke open everything the hospital had buried, the experimental drug, the altered reports, the quiet settlements, the children whose deaths were written off as anomalies. People were angry. Not the kind of anger that fades overnight, but the kind that forces a reckoning. The St. Christopher's Board released a formal statement that afternoon. We acknowledge administrative misconduct during the 2008 ZLV-03 trial and accept full responsibility for the harm caused. An independent audit and compensation program will begin immediately for all affected families. They called it accountability. I called it the sound of 17 years of silence finally breaking. Caleb stopped by my house later that evening. He looked exhausted but lighter, like someone who'd been carrying a secret too long and had finally set it down. It's everywhere now, he said. The Attorney General opened an inquiry. The families are coming forward. I nodded. Mrs. Reynolds called me. She said she finally slept through the night. He smiled faintly. You did it, Elaine. No, I said quietly. We did. He placed a small envelope on the table. Copies of the court filings. I thought you'd want to keep them. I slid my hand across the paper. For years, I had imagined what justice would look like: courtrooms, apologies, maybe even punishment. But now that it was here, it felt quieter than I expected. Not victory, just relief. He hesitated before leaving. You're going to her grave tomorrow, aren't you? Yes. You want me to come? I smiled gently. No. This part's for me and her. He nodded. Then I'll see you after. The next morning was gray and still. Clouds hung low, and the air smelled faintly of rain. I parked beside the old oak tree near the cemetery gates and walked the familiar path up the hill. Lydia's grave was just as I left it, clean, simple, with sunflowers growing wild along the edge. The headstone bore her name, the right date this time. I brushed away a few fallen leaves and sat beside it, legs folded, the newspaper tucked under my arm. I placed the printed article on the grass. 17 Years of Silence by Caleb Ross. Under the headline, there was a photo of the hospital, its once pristine sign now covered in flowers, candles, and handwritten notes from grieving families. I traced my fingers over Lydia's name and whispered, "They know now, sweetheart. They finally know." The breeze picked up, gentle and cool. The pages fluttered open to the paragraph that quoted Meyer's confession. The dead can't speak, but their data can. For a long while, I just sat there, listening to the wind rustle through the grass. That night, I didn't set an alarm. I didn't keep my phone face up. I didn't wait for the call. But at 2:59 a.m., I woke up anyway. Old habits die slowly. The moonlight cut across my bedroom wall, soft and pale. My phone rested on the nightstand, silent and dark. 3 o'clock, nothing. 3:02, still nothing. 3:04, the air was still. 3:06, quiet. I stared at the phone until the minute passed. For the first time in 17 years, it stayed dark. No ringing. No static. No whisper. Just peace. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The silence that used to haunt me now felt like a lullaby. Maybe the truth really does set something free. Later that week, the Attorney General held a press conference. Cameras flashed as officials confirmed everything: illegal trials, falsified data, corporate involvement. The families were promised restitution and memorials for their children. A name that had once meant hope was now synonymous with betrayal, but at least it would never be forgotten again. Caleb's article was nominated for an investigative award, though he never talked about it. He said the real reward was watching the letters come in, dozens of them from parents, nurses, even doctors, all thanking him for finally saying what no one else would. He sent me one of those letters. It was from a nurse who'd worked with Dr. Meyer. "He used to talk about your daughter all the time," she wrote. Said she smiled even when she was scared. He never forgave himself for what happened. Before he left, he said if the truth ever came out, it would be because she helped someone find it. I folded the letter and placed it inside Lydia's old photo album. The seasons turned. Time moved differently after that. I started gardening again. The house didn't feel like a museum anymore, it felt lived in. I left Lydia's room just as it was, but now when I walked past it, I didn't feel a sting. Just warmth. Sometimes, I'd catch myself humming her lullaby. Bluebirds never cry. The first time I sang it out loud, it didn't hurt. It just felt like breathing. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Caleb came by with a copy of his book, an expanded version of the investigation. The dedication page read, "For Elaine Porter and for every parent who refused to stay silent." I didn't cry this time. I just thanked him. A few months later, on the anniversary of Lydia's death, I returned to the cemetery with fresh sunflowers and the printed report, laminated now from the rain. I sat in the same spot, tracing her name again, and whispered, "Rest now, sweetheart. They know your story." The wind stirred softly through the grass, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. For a moment, I thought I heard her laugh, the same light sound from years ago when she chased bluebirds in our backyard. But it wasn't a haunting anymore. It was memory, finally unburdened. As I stood to leave, I placed my phone on her headstone, the same one that had once brought her voice back to me. The screen was blank, its reflection catching the gray clouds above. "Stay quiet," I whispered, smiling. "You've done enough talking." When I got home, I made tea and sat by the window. The rain began to fall softly against the glass, tapping out a rhythm that felt almost like breathing. The kind of rain that doesn't bring sadness, it just cleans what's left behind. Grief never really leaves. It changes shape. It becomes something you live with instead of fight. The truth doesn't erase loss, but it gives the pain somewhere to rest. Maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting, but remembering without breaking. Some stories end not with revenge or miracles, but with understanding. Elaine Porter's story reminds us that grief doesn't fade when truth is buried, it heals only when light reaches it. Many carry guilt for things they couldn't control. Parents, children, siblings, all carrying the weight of silence. But truth, once spoken, doesn't just set the record straight. It sets us free. If this story moved you, take a moment right now. Subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words might reach someone who still needs hope tonight. Because sometimes, all it takes to break 17 years of silence is one voice willing to speak.